There is sunshine out there. I don't have a bright blue to use, but I do have my indanthrene blue, and that should serve pretty well. We'll get some variety in there in a minute. I do work really fluid, and I like to work fluid, nice and wet, that is, because it allows me to go back in and add mixtures, add things to the wet area that I'm working in. In this case, it's a very large area. It's that sky area. It's very large. I'm going to bring it down into the background. More of the indanthrene blue. And I just mentioned working really wet so that I can do things like this. Go back and add color. I'm going to get some relatively dark blue and get it right up here at the top of the sky. Blending those in a little bit really well as actually a color for winter or late fall. It's a quite cool mixture. Both of those are cool colors, cool versions of blue or red, actually. I'm letting it blend and mix and mingle and sort of blend up. You can see it's feathering up there, and that just, in this case, in a scene like this, late fall scene like this, it just looks like the ends of those fine bare branches on fall trees. And again, since this area is wet, I can just drop that in there, let it mix and mingle, maybe help it a little bit with the brush, and I in that way can show areas where there's either light or perhaps some leftover leaves on those trees back there. And I'm going to start actually with this somewhat lighter color. This is some orange red, really, with, or yellow, I'm sorry, yellow orange that was mixed with the yellow, cadmium yellow, and the burnt scarlet. Now it's not dark at all, but it's a good start for this, a good base color to start with here. It covers the grassy areas. Get it a little bit richer and a little bit darker. And then this is where, if I mix a little bit of my indanthrene blue with the cadmium yellow, I can get a greenish color. In this case, it's a very olive green color that maybe looks a little bit like there's some green grass up there, there's fallen leaves up there, so there's all kinds of different colors on that autumn hill. Dark value on the road. I'm going to make sure this comes across the road again as if there's cast shadow there on the road. Using quick strokes, light strokes to maybe get a little bit of rough texture together in there, and maybe even a little bit of the burnt umber. And I'm going to start showing, if you remember on my value sketch, I was showing some of those cast shadows coming across the road. They would be coming off from behind these trees as well. The darkest color I can really get is a mixture of indanthrene blue and burnt umber. And maybe I'll put that up here to show that dark cast shadow. And again, coming across the road from another tree that's over there to the left. And coming off the trees back here. There would also be a cast shadow right up in here. It comes off the corner of the barn and works its way back through the field. And we're already now starting to show light by showing those contrasts between lighter areas, even within a dark value area, and then these darker marks that look like they would be cast shadows coming across the road and up the field. Starts to show light. Maybe a little of the indanthrene blue in it initially to get a really dark edge here. Oh, not nearly dark enough, but I'm going to go ahead and put this in. Pretty fluid. So the paint is thick, but it's also still very fluid. As I work my way back, I'll shift that color to more to the burnt scarlet. And in fact, I'm going to shift to a smaller, slightly smaller brush. The hill, again, painting around that doorway there. Get some of that bounced light up under this edge of the roof. Up on the roof, that would be, I'm imagining something metal. It would be a grayer color. I'm going to get that in first with a lighter wash. And yes, I'm touching these different areas together. I'm touching for instance, the edge of the roof with the metal part of the roof. That means it's going to blend there a little bit. That's really okay. And then the side of my cupola, similar treatment to the side of the barn down below, down here. Some of that brighter color up underneath the cupola where there might be some light bouncing up under there. Grays, they're really violet grays, but they're very nice actually for a lot of different elements, trees being one of them. Again, I'm going to blend this in down here. I'm going to sort of paint around that branch for now. As I work my way around the tree, some darker versions of that, and actually a dark area which would be what's known as the core of the shadow, which is found on rounded and cylindrical objects, where we go from light to shade. And then I'm going to warm that up a little bit on the back side. I'm going to go to the front of this barn first, and I'm essentially just using some of my burnt scarlet all by itself in a puddle that has mostly burnt scarlet, but it's got other colors in it as well. Probably some of the blue is in there, maybe some of the yellow. But whatever color it is, it'll work. And I'm going to put it on the smaller barn back here as well. Get some of my sort of brownish, grayish, greenish color that off the palette that I used kind of over here in this field. And I'm going to use that back here in that. This field would probably drop down the way it does here, drop down towards the road. So I'm going to darken that area a little bit. And I'm really just kind of picking up a orange-red color that's right there and mingling that right into that already wet wash. We'll get a little bit of our gray color and pick it up and put it on this tree, which again is supposed to be fairly light. In fact, I'm really going to make it much lighter down here and then start to get darker versions of that gray as I work my way up into the tree. And I'm really just establishing the main structure, the main branches, the larger branches on this tree with a small brush at this point. I'm going to go back with a rigger and get some additional branches in there a bit later, but for now it's just this. There would be a shadow. Burnt scarlet color up here on this part of the cupola as well. It would be painted, presumably the same color as the barn. There's probably some bounced light in there, so there's going to be some warmth in it. And then I'm going to darken it, sort of get it grayer up here where there's much less light bouncing in. And I'm mingling these two different colors in wet into wet, getting a nice mixing and mingling, a gradual change from one to the other. Probably the darkest mixture that we can make out of the colors that we're using in this painting. So I'm really going to darken that barn door right there. I'm leaving a little bit of a white highlight there that we're going to add some color into in a little bit. Same on the window. Again, some of the warm color that I can find on the palette. Tends to be some light in an open doorway like that, tends to be some light on the floor, and you can show it by doing something like that. Something similar inside this barn door, and again, I don't have it marked here, but I'm going to paint an edge where we'll get some bounced light in a little bit. And again, darker higher up, and then as I work my way down, I'll go back and get that warmer mixture. Same thing for this doorway. Again, a little lighter. It's farther away, so we'll make this one a little bit lighter. And again, it's a really steep angle here. The sun is low. Casting a long shadow along really along the entire roof of that barn. While we're working with these grays, and again, I'm just picking up gray off the palette now, these various mixtures of color. I'll go back and start putting in some additional branches, some of the finer branches, maybe at the top of this tree. This one as well, and even over here. We get a little bit of a cast shadow on the tree trunk right here, and maybe on some of these other branches that are working their way up into the sky. And this time I'm going to use this small brush, but I'm going to use the side of it. Try to get some indications of bark texture with what's essentially rough brush work. And at the same time I'm adding some darker color and value. And then with the rigger, again, some finer branches. Actually, let's work on these guys over here. In this case, this is a thicker branch, but I can do that with my rigger as well. I'm going to bring a branch down over the cupola, just overlapping, so we get a really good look at that space. I'm going to warm up this branch. I started with the darker gray, but I'm going to warm it up with some of the kind of warm, lightish brown that we've been using again in a lot of areas in the painting. And that just makes it look like this branch maybe is catching a little more light than, or that part of the branch is catching a little more light than other parts. And then switching back to the darker gray, I can get, again, a change of light, a change of the sense of light. This guy, I think, needs some branches as well. Now, I didn't draw these branches in. I guess you might say I'm winging it a little bit here, but once you know what a subject looks like, trees, for instance, it makes it easier to do things like this without drawing them in. I do prefer to work with a minimal drawing, partially because really detailed drawings make us feel like we've got to follow those. It tends to separate our composition into separate individual objects and elements, and I'm afraid breaks up the painting a little bit. So I tend to work with these less detailed drawings version of whatever that object is, be it a tree or barn or whatever it happens to be. And now I'm working out to where the twigs would be. And as a cast shadow, it really should be darker than this area, which is shade. It's a different kind of shadow. I am going to paint around the barn window there. It would have some bounced light up in this area, so I will lighten it here a little bit. Keep it darker up here. Follow carefully that edge that I just drew. Separation between different panels here, so I'm going to make that line and run in some vertical marks with my rigger up from that and actually down from that as well in just a second. I'm going to run it down to the top edge of the doorway. You don't need a lot of those. A few will do. On this little barn, I'm actually going to do something similar to what I did on the tree there, which is use the side of the brush and just make essentially some rough dry brush vertical strokes. To get a sort of darker reddish brown. And again, with the side of my brush, trying to get some dry brush marks here. So I'm indicating maybe some tire tracks, whatever they happen to be. Maybe even down here, along there, even here especially. And then we all like to put in weeds, don't we, in those country scenes. I'm going to get my small round, get some of that, well, maybe some of this warmer color here. And from where I just put in those marks on the road, I'm going to do some vertical dry brush work, like this. Maybe a little bit here, a little bit here, there, maybe a little even here. We really like to put those weeds in, don't we? But usually we like to get our rigger out or a small brush and put them in individually, one weed at a time. But it's not necessary to do that. Now, if you want to, we'll do some of that. Again, just a few. Really don't overdo this. These are a little bit more individual, and the marks look like a little bit more like individual weeds. Up here near the barn there might be some weeds, and for those, again, I use the side of the brush. Not that these are really necessary. We like to do it because we think it really adds, and it does add a little, but it's easy to overdo, so you don't want to do that. I darkened it a little bit there. And again, we really like doing this, but it's best to be really, really careful with this kind of work.